Welcome back to Torah in 10, Parshas Vayeshev. I'm Jody Burkell, and I'm so excited to be here with you again this week. Did you ever apply for a job and get turned down, only to realize that another more amazing opportunity was just around the corner? What about a relationship that didn't work out? And only years later did you realize and see that this was actually a blessing in disguise? Or even more dramatically, we heard stories of people who missed the subway on their way to work in the morning, only to hear later that the date was September 11th and that they worked at the World Trade Center. Rabbi Sacks says, seen through the eyes of faith, today's curse can be the beginning of tomorrow's blessings. This is a profound idea because we live life looking forward, but we understand it only looking back. In theory, we get it, but applying it to our daily lives, that's another story altogether, isn't it? We live our lives one day at a time. As the days and years pass, our life may seem like a random series of events, or in some cases, a series of unfortunate events. Yet looking back, they often make sense, and we see a bigger picture going on behind the scenes. When my first son was in elementary school, we tried to move him into another public school for various reasons, but mainly that he would have more Jewish friends in his class. And there were other public schools that fit this demographic. We tried twice to transfer him, and twice we were rejected. At the time, we were so frustrated and disappointed with the system, we couldn't understand why he couldn't get in. A number of years later, as my husband and I were sitting in an assembly for Yom Ha'atzmaut in our son's new school, a Jewish day school, I remember saying to my husband, this is why he didn't get into that school. God had another plan for us. He was always meant to go here. The job we didn't take, or the job we lost, the relationship that didn't pan out, that door that may have closed, our challenges, disappointments, and failures, seen in retrospect, often turn out to have been our deepest learning experiences and surprisingly, a blessing. Nowhere do we see this more strikingly as in the story of Joseph in this week's Parsha. We begin on a high note. The Torah tells us that Jacob loved Joseph more than all his sons, and so he gave him a gift. For those of us who know, it was a coat of many colors. Seems like a pretty reasonable thing for a parent to do, but very quickly this gift turns out to be Joseph's downfall. His brothers, out of jealousy, begin to hate him. And when Joseph shares his dreams with them, they hate him even more. Things are going from bad to worse. His brothers want to kill him, but instead they throw him in a pit, and eventually, at the age of 17, they sell him into slavery in Egypt. There seems to be a ray of hope when Joseph gets a job in the home of Potiphar, a wealthy Egyptian. But then Potiphar's wife tries repeatedly to seduce him, and when he refuses her, she accuses him of assaulting her. Joseph is thrown into prison. The situation seems grim, but then another chance at redemption appears when two of Pharaoh's servants join him in prison, and Joseph interprets their dreams. Joseph asks one thing of them. In a last-ditch effort, he says, remember me when it goes well for you with Pharaoh, and please show me some kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this place. It's actually heartbreaking to read what happens next. The Torah tells us the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. It seems that all hope is lost, but the theme song from the musical is Go, 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 Joseph. So we know this is not the end of the story. Just 2 years later, at the beginning of next week's Parsha, we discover that all this has been leading up to Joseph's supreme elevation. Pharaoh makes him viceroy, second in command. At 30 years old, he is now the second most powerful man in the ancient world. Talk about going from zero to hero overnight. I believe there are two ways to travel through life. One is believing that we are like a leaf floating in the breeze, that the events of our life are mere happenstance, and that there's only blind faith. But in another view, the Jewish view that Rabbi Sacks so beautifully describes, is that God is with us as we travel through time. Sometimes we feel as if we were lost, but then we discover, as Joseph did, that he has been guiding our steps all along. He says, don't think you understand the story of your life at halftime. There is no greater example in the Torah of this idea than the story of Joseph. The hated brother who was thrown into a pit as a teenager has become the man who saves an entire region, including his family, from a famine. There was no way of knowing this, how the story would end, had we stopped reading midway. We see through the events of Joseph's life God's hand at work, even when Joseph had felt abandoned by every human being he had met. We see, looking back, that every episode that seems to be leading to tragedy turns out to be, in retrospect, to be the necessary steps guiding Joseph along his path to greatness. Rabbi Sacks teaches us despair is never justified. Even if our life has been a series of unfortunate events, there is always hope. The next chapter of our lives can be full of blessings. Life seen this way through the eyes of faith can help us reframe the events of our own lives. We have to know that in an instant, things can turn around, and today's challenges and disappointments might just be the beginning of tomorrow's blessings. This week is so much a message full of hope. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom.